All right. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. It's awesome. If you are listening to my voice right now, I just want to thank you for joining me here on the Mettler podcast. I got a lot of show notes today, so I'm hoping that this won't be a crazy diatribe into the inner workings of the apartment complex that is my mind. I'm hoping that it will have a little bit more form to it. I'm trying to give you guys a little bit more form because I want this to be a thinking exercise and something that you can actually enjoy listening to. So I'm working on that. So first, my quote of the day or my thought of the day for everybody is that our destinies are a time lock safe that can only be opened at the proper time in your life. You arrive at this moment in time where your time lock destiny safe opens. It cannot open until all the proper things are fulfilled, right? It's like a quest. It's like a video game where you can't open it until you have all the magical items in your bag. I feel like that's kind of where I'm at. I'm attempting to gather all the magic items to make this thing and unlock the time safe that is my destiny, right? I'm totally working on making that happen. I went to see the dentist yesterday. That kind of prevented me from going and taking care of the lease for the podcasting space. I'm pretty excited to move and get up in that place because I very much want to get started down the path of producing podcasts that are not only audio based, but also video. That is where this graduates to next is I would like to, once I have the proper space and I can have the proper setup, be able to stream audio and video. And these will become videos and not just audios. And I was debating that. I was almost like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because ironically enough, when all you can do is listen to my voice, when there's no video component to this, we're just sharing ideas. It's almost like I'm talking directly to you. But when there's the distraction of the video component, this actually becomes a somewhat different thing. And I was thinking about that. It feels almost like there might be a place for both things. I kind of consider this almost like the fireside chat, if you will. One of the subjects that I'd like to talk about today is let's talk about the demise of linear television. Recently, I've spent the last 6 years in and around the television business and watching the effects of the internet and its impact on linear television has been interesting. Because it is my opinion that linear television is in a place that it's never found itself before, right? The future is 100% on demand. And linear television doesn't fit within that model, right? That is where the model is changing, is that people are now, they demand what they want when they want it. And linear television is not able to provide that component. It's my opinion that in the future, the only demographic linear television is going to be serving will be the poor, will be people who are so poor that they don't have data plans. Now, what's ironic is that I see a future more like a Ready Player One, where people live in squalor on the outside. They spend a lot of their time in the internet anyway, so it's more about their internet experience than what their actual apartment or life looks like outside of their online world, right? To some extent, that's true now. I think that linear television is very much struggling with their model's viability. And when I say their model, their business model, the viability of their business model. And they don't want to transmit their level of anxiety about the problem to everybody. Because if everybody knew how much anxiety these people were facing with the changing of their paradigm, I guarantee you it's causing some sleepless nights, right? Because once upon a time, networks ruled the landscape. They could dictate the terms of the engagement, and it was very much their environment. They got to dictate the terms. Well, the internet has come along and it has completely fractured and fragmented all the demographics into a bazillion different little smaller groups. I was just looking at YouTube this morning. Since I'm about to engage in this whole YouTubing thing on a different level than I ever have before, I'm trying to learn more about it, right? So I was looking at trending videos and top videos, and interestingly enough, I think that it's weird. The videos that I get to see that are trending are probably different than the videos that you get to see that are trending based on algorithms. I don't think that's actually right, but what are you going to do, right? They own it. I think that they're facing a lot of anxiety about how this paradigm is going to change the terms. It is now our market, right? We are producing the content that is drawing the views and, in this case, the listens. We are creating the future and posting it ourselves, man. And this is a networking model. Where does that leave space for you? And I think what it does is there is a space for the network television model, but it's actually a much smaller space than it once was. It is a much more limited space than it used to be, and they will never go back to the glory days that they once had where they just owned and controlled the entire thing. Those days are long gone. So I think that television is under a pretty big amount of change right now, and they don't know exactly what that's going to look like. And interestingly enough, one of the things that would happen a lot during negotiations at the company where I used to work, every time it would come around to negotiate the contract, that company that was, negotiating would always want more money for their content. And interestingly enough, oftentimes, demographically speaking, and from a perspective of views and minutes watched, the return on investment on their product was actually going down over time because people were less interested, they were less engaged, and they would fall off of it faster. And see, this is the interesting thing about when you run a company where you measure every single thing. And let me tell you, Comcast knows exactly when you bail on that commercial. They know exactly when you bail on that TV show. Whether or not they choose to monetize that or analyze it is maybe up for discussion. But I guarantee you that they track all the things that you do. User metrics is actually a very valuable component of what television broadcasters and service providers sell back to the markets. That becomes data that they monetize about viewer habits and success of programming. And ironically, it is so accurate that they could tell you that right at this moment in the show, when you started talking about X subject, people changed the channel. And effectively what you have, you will create a whole bunch of television, you will create a line of entertainment designed expressly to not offend everybody, or designed to expressly to not offend anybody. And I'm a big believer that if all that you talk about is things that don't offend anybody, well, then you're not really talking about a whole lot. You're really not touching on subjects that really need conversation. I think that television is trying to figure that out. They don't know what it looks like. They're scrambling, and they don't want you to know that. But we are the future. This is the future. Content driven by us is actually technically the future. It doesn't mean that there's no place for the HBOs. It doesn't mean that there's no place for places that are producing really high quality, dramatic, scripted content. That's going to stick around, right? We want to be entertained. The cable network news model, that's dying. The local news model, that's dying. Newspapers and publishing, that's really suffering. Even companies that were once valued at huge valuations like Vice News, I was just reading yesterday that Disney had to write down more than $500 million in losses on that company since they picked it up. Think about that. Having to write off $500 million on what is effectively a news and lifestyle site. Does that make sense? It almost tells me that the astronomical valuation of that company was completely off the mark to begin with. My next topic of discussion, platforms are laying the groundwork for their own demise. When I say platforms, I mean platforms like YouTube and Twitter, Snapchat, and these different platforms. In the end, they are laying the groundwork or the framework for their own demise in the future, right? Because one of the things that's interesting about humans and internet denizens, if you will, is that they are like sand. They are like sand. The harder you squeeze them, the more they fall through the cracks of your fingers. right? We don't want to be squeezed. That part of the reason that we were drawn to the internet to begin with was the very idea of just being able to share information directly with each other in a way that was not going to be arbitered by some higher power, right? We wanted to be able to just talk directly to each other, and that's what came out of this. So I think that what's going to bring this about for all these different platforms is that, one, there's too many rules that are arbitrarily applied. They would tell you that hate speech is like porn. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I know it when I see it. If the only thing that measures whether or not something is outside the boundaries of the Overton window is an arbitrary judgment by a human being that sits there and looks at it, well then, I don't like that plan. I should be able to decide, you know? One of my beefs is that this is punishing the group for the actions of individuals. Right? So when individuals post something that's really kind of offensive or heinous, you're punishing the entire group for merely wanting to see it, as though we don't have the right, as though anything that people post in videos anymore or in content anymore is actually the realm of the public. And for them to withhold it from you is actually, they try to act like this is under the guise of our own good, but like, right? It seems like you're only interested in applying these rules to certain groups of voices, and it seems to be the voices that are calling you out. You're not interested in regulating the other voices that cause drama and cause people to click. You like that stuff. You just don't want people that call it into question why you get paid for it, but then don't give the money to the people that create the content. That's another beef that I have, is that I feel like a lot of the content that is being created by really good creators out there is effectively, for all intents and purposes, being stolen by the platforms that are putting it up, who are more than happy to monetize it for its controversy value, but don't want to give it a lift or make it a part of the public discussion. Which brings me to my next point, that I don't pay for a company to decide for me what I want to watch. That was what I was originally really drawn to YouTube for, was that I could watch whatever I want, whenever I wanted. It was like the Grand Theft Auto of video, right? You could just do whatever you wanted. You could watch whatever you wanted. You could learn something. You could just waste time. You could watch music videos. You could do all kinds of different things. That was what made it so attractive to me to begin with. One of the interesting things that has come out of YouTube and the current state of news is that if news is simply the realm of opinion and is less dependent on news gathering as we typically think of it and facts, then how are citizen journalists not equally relevant in the news world with their coverage or opinions? You know, like a good example is wearechange.org, right? Like, he is getting a lot of heat right now, and YouTube is working really hard to suppress him. But for the life of me, I can't understand why an individual who goes to places that are messed up and films from the ground, on the ground, doing what we would actually call investigative journalism, why he is somehow, they're trying to blackball him while they try and promote voices that we know put falsities out there, or that are trying to sell crazy talk. You know, I don't understand it. It's proof of how threatened they feel by citizen journalists, that citizen journalists are really have picked up the guidon. That's the flag that a military unit would carry. They have picked up the guidon, and they are taking the charge. They're leading the charge, right? Citizen journalists, the personal is political. And citizen journalists are out there making these videos and making very compelling content that shows you what's really going on. And it's interesting because it oftentimes is not congruent with what the news is telling you is going on. So I have this theory. I call this my now defunct theory of 48 months. Or is it? Right? So once upon a time, I had a theory that people really only had about 48 months in them for any given website. Whether it was YouTube, MySpace, or Facebook, or Twitter, or any given website. Name any website you want. I used to believe that there was this thing in humans where we can only care about it for about 48 months. 4 years is about all you give a website. You go there, in the beginning, it's very exciting. That's how MySpace was when it first started, right? It was very exciting. We were all changing our pages and posting our pictures and showing our friends. and everybody's clicking through everybody's friends, right? And that was cool. And then Facebook came along, and Facebook was like a better version of MySpace, and MySpace had petered out, right? Because it had reached the limits of its capacity to handle the amount of people on it and the programming language that it was built under. So Facebook came along and effectively just completely snuffed it out, replaced it, right? Now MySpace is this weird place where if you're trying to promote your band or music, you go. I think that to some extent, what's ironic is I can't honestly answer this because I haven't been there in so long, I don't know. It seems to me that they've managed to make a small transition into that space, being a place where you can promote your band. So another thing that I think is going to cause the demise of these platforms is that there's too much controversy around user data, how that is monetized and sold, and that has hurt the desirability of a lot of these things, right? A lot of folks are like, it's not really cool that you do that. Even though I'm not giving you any money for this, it's not really cool that you do that. It comes down to businesses are trying to do whatever they can do to monetize the things that they have, right? And your data is an asset that they have, and they want to monetize it. They want to understand you, and they want to sell you things. They want to aim their marketing directly at you. So another thing that I think has come out of all of this exposure around regulating speech and all these platforms trying to maintain this perfect stance of correctness somewhere in the don't offend anybody zone, which I think is ridiculous, is they've technically exposed their belief that freedom and truth are meaningless or are definitely a lesser consideration to growth and profits. Growth and profits are definitely taking the primary seat, which I think is actually flawed reasoning for the very fact that you could stand up for free speech. The way the internet works, you can completely stand up for free speech. All you'd have to do is have a click-through warning that identifies content as controversial. You don't even have to say why. You can just say the following content is controversial and it may upset some viewers, and if you don't want to see it, don't click on this. That allows the user to decide if they see it or not. In my mind, that is what a consumer-driven economy looks like. The user decides if they want to see that content or not. Believe me, I've seen content that I can't unsee on YouTube, and it was my own fault. Nobody but me clicked on it. See, that's the other thing, is that I already believe that the internet is a voluntary engagement. Nobody forces anybody to view any content. Nobody pulls a Clockwork Orange and holds your face there and holds your eyelids open and makes you watch anything. Anything you watch on the internet is something you've chosen to view. So at the end of that, if the content made you upset or it sickened you or whatever, well, then you had the opportunity to not view it. You did have the opportunity to not view it, right? That's the thing that we forget. It's a completely voluntary thing. That's why I can't understand regulating anything on it. Censorship is antithetical to the very idea of the internet and what it was founded on. It was founded on the free exchange of information, and that technically all information belongs to all of humanity. When information hits the internet, now it belongs to all of us. That's how that works. And the other thing that I realize is that it is slow death to not be able to express one's self. Like, the only thing in the world that we live to do is express ourselves. And if you're not allowed to do that, it builds up in you and it makes you crazy on the inside. You have to be able to express yourself. That is an important component of being a human and being alive and free. Because Americans expect that, that is a requirement, is that you are able to express yourself freely. One of the things that I love about doing this, the podcast thing, is that I feel kind of like Harry Hardon in Pump Up the Volume, right? I feel kind of like that. Like I'm telling you my pirate thoughts on my pirate talk show where, I put this on the internet in sort of this funky way and it's the most bizarre thing because corporate America loves money so much more than they have scruples or morals. They will let me use this platform to point out the fact that they are greedy. It's sort of funny. One of the things that maybe people don't understand about humanity is that humanity is a lot like a tube of toothpaste, man. That when you squeeze it, it oozes out somewhere else. It goes somewhere else. When you squeeze it, it is displaced and it goes somewhere else. They will gradually force people to establish new watering holes, and people will gravitate to that because it would represent a return to the idea of a free internet again. And this, in my opinion, is going to be led by young people. Young people are going to be the ones who don't want to lose the right to say what they think or believe. Because again, it goes back to it is a slow death to not be able to express yourself. And especially for young people, I would desperately want to fight for the right to be able to say what I have to say if I was a young person. And the idea that we're talking about eliminate, we've been doing this for 250 years now, but hey, let's just eliminate free speech now. Let's just curtail that right, like it's not a big deal. No. So I think that all of that environment is actually creating a place that's ripe for a new crop of replacements that actually support and promote free speech. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, that this thing called hate speech exists, right? I argue that there is only speech. Some of it you like, some of it you don't like. Hate speech is what a group that doesn't like something that somebody else is saying dubs something they don't want that person to be able to say. Well, that's not really the intent of the First Amendment. The First Amendment was to protect people who say things that people don't like, but still gives them the ability to say it. And I would argue that what is wrong with letting someone tell you exactly where they stand? What is wrong with letting a racist or a person who is bigoted or whatever tell you exactly where they stand? Why exactly is that dangerous? Because nobody forces anyone to believe what that person says. No one is obligated to agree to what is said. That person has now outlined precisely why you may or may not want to align yourselves with them. What's the problem there? Right? I don't understand. Because to me, when somebody is a racist or a bigot or something like that, let them talk. Because they're going to tell you exactly where they stand. And then you can decide, well, I don't really believe in that. And I also believe that it's okay to agree with people on certain things and disagree with them on other things. That's called being human. Practically every human on the planet of Earth agrees with other humans about some things and disagrees about others. There's nothing wrong with that. It was always meant to be that way. So that's what I'm going to say about that, is that I think that they are basically squeezing the toothpaste and or the sand, and they're going to force it to go somewhere else. And I can't wait. I can't wait, because I would really rather get back to just being able to choose the content that I view. I don't want companies to decide for me what is relevant. I don't like that idea, right? Because that leads us down a path where you only see the things they want you to see. Where do you think that goes? Nowhere good, I can tell you that. So one of the incredible transformations that has taken place in society and in our zeitgeist is we have gone from watching television to watching each other make videos. And that transformation has taken place over the last couple of years. And that goes back to what has television scrambling, right? Is that there is a new paradigm where we watch each other and or we listen to each other, which I think is, man, that's growth. Listening to each other is definitely growth. There's no doubt about that. So they don't like that. I think that they're deciding that they don't like what society does when they're allowed to communicate with each other directly. Now they must intercede in that. I don't like that, man. That's not how the internet was supposed to work. All right, my next segment is called Things Nobody Tells You as a Kid. When you're a child, adults are trying to protect you from things, right? And we often do a disservice to children by not being honest with them, by not telling them the truth about the world, right? So here's just a few things that I wish I could have known or would have been told when I was younger. So if there's somebody out there in the world that you're a young person and you're listening to this, man, this is for you. This list is for you. Things nobody tells you as a kid. That television and the movies is not real life. It's not even close. It is a distilled version of humanity. It's like taking the mash and distilling that into whiskey. You are taking the most dramatic elements and you are taking the most salacious, meaning most noteworthy, watchworthy type stuff, and you're using that to get eyeballs to view it, right? That's exactly what television is. They are doing that 100%. It is not representative of real life. Even stuff that is sold to you as real life is kind of not representative of real life. Another thing they never told me or didn't explain good enough in my mind was why you might need that math. Like there was a lot of mathematical concepts that I might have actually bothered to remember or would have put more effort into remembering had they given me some practical applications for why I might need to know that in the future. I think that was lacking. That's just me. The next one, and I think this one is really important. One of the things that the world does not tell you when you're a kid is that the world sends you a lot of mixed messages. The world is sending kids a lot of mixed messages. They live in a hypersexualized world where girls are wearing shorts that are all the way up to the bottom of their butt now. And yet they live in a world where they're not allowed to view a female as any kind of object or objectify her. Even though she dresses in an overtly, totally sexual manner, he is not, as a young man, allowed to view her that way. Those are very contradictory messages to send to a young boy. That's very confusing, right? That is a very confusing state for young people to be in, where you hypersexualize them and then punish them for acting on their hypersexuality. That is a mixed message if ever there was one. Another thing that they don't tell you when you're a kid is that effectively the world is stacked against you, but we all play the game anyway. And that part of the game is figuring out how to, in a world that is stacked against you, make your way against it. Figure out your own way in the world and figure out a way to make some money in it. But the truth is that the system is stacked against you. It requires you to really put some effort into it to be successful. Another thing that we are not telling children these days, but we should, is that the vast majority of the world does not care if you're offended or if your feelings are hurt. It's just the truth. Once you get outside of your college cocoon, the vast majority of the world does not care if you are offended or if your feelings are hurt. Man, get over it. Everybody is offended sometimes. Everybody's feelings get hurt sometimes. It's not an argument. It has to go deeper than your feelings are hurt for it to be an argument. Sorry. And then the last thing that nobody tells you when you're a kid is that adults manipulate the youth for profit, and you should be skeptical of that. College is actually this amazing opportunity for you to sign a piece of paper and get a huge amount of money. And the college wants that money. They don't really care what your intentions are. They don't care if you really plan to come here and get a good education or if you just plan to come here and party. They do not care. They just want you to sign the paper because it guarantees that you will be a debt slave for the foreseeable future and that they're going to get their budget money. That is what they're actually after. So to the youth of the world, adults manipulate the youth for profit, and you should be skeptical of that, right? Truth. I was going to talk a little bit about Denver and Colorado news, but I didn't see anything really worth talking about. I didn't see anything that was beyond, the normal kind of garbage news that's out there these days. I didn't see anything really great. When I do, though, maybe I'll include that a little bit. And then for my last topic, before I wrap this one up today, is that I want to talk about the real truth about how Americans feel about legal immigration. Legal immigration. I'm not going to address illegal immigration today. Illegal immigration is a very hot topic. In the spirit of talking about things that I think we actually agree about, here is my opinion, as I see it, about the real truth about how Americans feel about legal immigration. My personal feeling on it is I like legal immigrants. I promote the idea of having people legally immigrate to the United States. I admire those folks that want to do that. I respect people that have stood in line for extended periods of time. It's usually a long time, right? They have to learn all kinds of things about the United States. They have to take a test that many Americans can't actually pass. And I think that these folks that have waited in line and done many tasks to prove their value and desire to be an American, they oftentimes have a greater sense of appreciation for what it means to live here in America than people that are born here, right? Like they actually have something to compare it against. Like when you ask people that have emigrated from former Soviet bloc states, a good example. I used to deal with a guy who was from a former Soviet bloc state. He was a super great guy. I really liked him. And I asked about what it was like living in where he came from. And his first answer, the first word out of his mouth, was corruption. And that everything was a bribe. Everything was a little bit of graft. Everything was a payoff. America has its flaws, but we're not like that. We're not like that. And it's very difficult for somebody to be that way in America for in the long term and not get caught or get busted. We are still the cleanest dirty shirt in the hamper when it comes to that, right? Going back to what I was saying is that I don't have any problem whatsoever with people legally trying to emigrate to the United States, especially if they actually want to become an American. To me, actually becoming an American doesn't mean that you have to entirely leave your culture behind. But it does mean that you have to you're going to have to at least leave the radical elements of your culture behind so that you fit in with other Americans. If you want to come here and all you want to do is sow the seeds of discourse, well, then you might not be a good fit for being an American. And I don't want anybody to take that the wrong way. It's just the truth. Americans believe in certain things. If you don't believe in those certain things, you might not be a good fit. It's just the truth, people. So I'm very in favor of legal immigration. I very much want good people to come and legally emigrate to the United States. I have no beef with those people. I don't think that any other real American does either. I think in a way that legal immigration represents what our grandfathers and grandparents went through, or their parents, right? Legal immigration was the act that they committed. They went to Ellis Island, they were registered, they they moved into America, and they worked to immigrate. And they work to integrate into becoming an American. And it doesn't mean that they entirely left their culture behind, but that they melted into the melting pot that is America, right? I believe in that melting pot. I've never met a true American that doesn't want people to legally immigrate into the United States. I've never met one. So the idea that we don't want immigrants is nonsense. It's complete nonsense. We just want people that have taken the time and have bothered to go through the steps. Those are the people that are demonstrated that they're all about this, man. I want those people. I've worked with some people that are here on foreign visas and stuff like that are really great, amazing people. Would I be down for those people immigrating here and becoming Americans? Yes. Yes, I would. Right? I don't have any beef with those people becoming Americans because they're already contributing and they desire to contribute and they have something to contribute. Those are the people we want. You know, if you want to work and you want to work hard and you want to do things in America, we don't have any problem with that. We really don't. So that's what I'm going to say about, and I think it's something we can agree on. None of us as real true Americans has any beef with people who legally immigrate into the United States. Right? We don't. We just don't. All right, people. So that's going to wrap up the podcast for today. I'm going to go ahead and get this bad boy edited and get it out there for you so you can hear it. And I really want to thank you guys. I really want to thank you guys for being here with me and listening to this show. I hope that you like it. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Yeah. And thank you so much for being here on the Matt Mettler Podcast. The Matt Mettler Podcast is a Matt Mettler production. Copyright 2019.